Where's Shay?
Shay's over here.
Oh,
Just like-
okay.
I still think of
She's-
Hollywood Squares.
Yeah, really.
Match game.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, might as well turn it.
Okay.
It's-
Darsha, you want to,
Yeah.
we'll turn things over to you and to Sean.
Let me see if it will let me, I put on my master naturalist hat tonight because
Yay!
I'm just like having a bad hair week, but honestly, mostly I'm being,
Aren't
yeah,
we
thank
all?
you for laughing, one person. Mostly, I just wanted to point out that we have a lot of opportunities. Each year you get a pin. And this year I happen to remember that I have a Diana Fritillary pin, which I hopefully can say better than I can show at any point here. It's like a fancy multicolored year pin. Does anybody know what year that pin is?
Mm.
I can look it up, but I don't know.
No,
offhand.
that's all right. It's beside the point. And so besides being our fanciest pin, I think that we give out, it's her state butterfly. And, you know, we have a lot of state animals, and yes, butterfly, sorry, animals. But the Diana Fritillary is in decline in some ways. And so it's important from a conservation standpoint to take care of things we don't love as well as things we love, but surely we love our state butterfly. And so our speaker tonight is one of the people that stepped up for Diana Fritillary conservation in our state. And she is the co-founder of the Diana Project. And she's a active member of the Northwest Arkansas Master Naturalists and Ozark Wildlands. And so we would like to hear from her about that. She's got a wealth of experiences. She's a veteran, so thank you for that. And I've got a couple of questions for you, Sean, really briefly. One, what got you into the Master Naturalists? And also, what do you think your biggest accomplishment has been as a person in Arkansas? Thank you.
Thank you. It's nice to see everybody. Thanks for coming out. I became a master naturalist because, and the same reason really that I do the Diana Project. I grew up here in Arkansas, in Northwest Arkansas, and just the devastating amount of habitat loss that occurs in my field of vision daily, just it became overwhelming to me, really to the point of being depressed about it, just the anxiety from watching things disappear so rapidly. And that's why I got into Master Naturalist in the first place. I think I was in it in 2019 or 18. And then of course COVID and all that, I wasn't very active. So the Diana Project was kind of me jumping back into it feet first. And again, for the same reason, when I found out that the state butterfly was in trouble, it sort of put a big colorful icon on conservation for me, because it's such a a weak species in comparison to a lot of things, because its habitat is so vulnerable and so specific, that I think if we can just save this one thing that is ours to take care of, we claimed it, and it's our responsibility. And then as a master naturalist, it's just kind of embarrassing for my state butterfly to go away on my watch. As far as my personal biggest accomplishment, I would probably say that's my son, who just became a doctor in residence in psychiatry. And that's kind of my big give back to society. As a single parent, that's my biggest point of pride.
Well, thank you. And I'm going to turn the meeting on over to you to talk about this project, because it sounds really interesting. And obviously, it's right up our right up our alley to be worrying about butterflies and about butterfly conservation. Even people that are afraid of insects usually somehow block out that a butterfly is indeed an insect. One thing I would ask, we've got 46 participants right now, and in terms of saving bandwidth for Sean and for her content sharing, if you could both mute yourself and shut off your video, that will help us. That tends to be a problem sometimes. So if people don't do that, I may go ahead and have Anna and David turn it off for now. We'll of course turn it back on when it's time for questions. So I'll come back in a bit, but over to you, Sean, and we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Okay, thanks. Let me see if I get my screen sharing here. If I could get this going right.
Great, we're seeing it.
Okay. Let me get some of this stuff out of the way. Okay. So I picked this quote to have when I do the presentations in person. I just leave this as the opening screen so everyone has a chance to see one of these researches that I've run across. I'll just put out there at the end of the time when we go over questions, if anybody wants some of the research that we talk about and that I reference here, I'm more than happy to send a follow-up email that would include this research among some other things. And again, this is the Diana fritillary is among the most sensitive organisms that we have, and we'll look into that a little bit when we talk about the challenges that it faces. So just to clarify, I am with the Diana Project, and our goal is to save Arkansas state butterfly. My name is Sean Hunter. I am not an ologist of any kind. As Darcy said, I'm master naturalist with the Northwest chapter. I do belong to the Ozark chapter of Wild Ones, and I'm also a member of the National Association for Interpretation. This presentation is normally 45 minutes, but I'm going to try to make that a little bit faster for you guys. But we will cover the kind of the history of the Diana Project, a little bit about the Diana's life cycle in comparison to the more familiar monarch. And I do have a list of nectar plants. And then at the end, again, I'll share some resources with you. And I don't know, with the videos turned off, if anybody needs anything, I'm kind of watching the chat to see if anyone has any questions in the middle of it. That's fine too. This picture is our co-founder, Curtis Leister. He worked at the Botanical Garden of the Ozarks as a volunteer, and somebody asked him one day, "What's the state butterfly?" And he didn't know. And then as he dug into it, he learned that the reason we don't have it at the Native Butterfly House in Fayetteville is because you have to have a special permit. So we dug into the reasoning for that and found out many, many sad things about our state butterfly. So the big question that Curtis started asking people as the Diana Project introduction, he always asked people, what is the Arkansas state butterfly? And about 50% of the people will say the monarch, and the other half don't know. So obviously it's not the monarch, or we wouldn't be here talking about the Diana. So our state butterfly is the Diana fritillary, the scientific name being Argynnis diana. If you do a Google search, you may come up with these other taxons that were just different historical names. So here's your Diana fritillary. The female is on the left and the male on the right. Dame Diana, after the Greek goddess Diana, of the goddess of the forest and the hunt, which is indicative of the fact that they do hang out at the forest edge. The fritillary comes from the checkered spots that are prominent on the dorsal side. You can see here and here the checkered spaces. So that's what's a name. A little bit about the history of the Diana. let me know if anybody thinks I'm going too fast. I didn't want to take up the full 45 minutes to leave room for questions. So the history of the Diana, it was first discovered or identified in the 1700s. And all through the 1900s, it was still being collected and appreciated as the most magnificent and splendid species of its genus. But it has seen a steady decline since the mid 1900s for many reasons. It was because it's seen a steady decline, it was designated in 2007 as our state butterfly. It is currently vulnerable to extinction in 5 states and imperiled, which is a little bit worse, in 4 other states. And it is completely gone from the rest of its historic range. So in 2015, Arkansas Game and Fish Commission put out this wildlife action plan. And in the plan, it lists 377 species of greatest conservation need in Arkansas. It does have mammals, reptiles, insects, and birds. It lists each of these species conservation status, the reasons for their decline, and the recommended next steps to help them. So regarding our state butterfly, the Game and Fish Commission says that Dianas are somewhere between vulnerable and imperiled. And by their definition, that means the Arkansas state butterfly is at a moderate to high risk of extinction. And I just want to point out that this was put out in 2015. And I've only found one other research paper since then. So we're lacking a lot of data, current data. So various causes of decline, and these are from the resources that I've found. There's a lot of different sources that have different causes, but nobody seems to agree on any one thing. So loss of habitat, obviously, due to urbanization, the pine industry, strip mining, fragmented range, pesticide and herbicide use. This is for the home gardener, as well as the pine industry. The pine industry had a huge problem with what was called gypsy moth. And they did a blanketing of pesticides, and the timing was bad, and the location was bad. So it really put a dent in the Diana's population. Forest fire suppression, which began in the 1900s, and we are since learning that that was a really bad decision on somebody's part. The Diana's habitat could decrease by up to 90% by 2050. And that was that most recent research that I found. So back to the Game and Fish's action plan. They've summarized the reasons, and this is what we really go by. The reasons being a restricted range, few populations within those ranges, and a recent and widespread population declines. And anybody driving through Arkansas knows that that's mostly from farming and urbanization and pine industry. So in that wildlife action plan, they also give the best actions for the Diana in order to give them the best chance of survival. And that is creation and protection of habitat, native plant gardens, as we all know, and responsible pesticide herbicide use, and outreach and education for pollinators. And this is kind of a culmination of where the Diana Project comes from. We really abide by the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission recommendations. So the purpose of the Diana Project is to utilize conservation education and citizen science to minimize the challenges to Arkansas pollinators. And you'll notice that this doesn't say minimize challenges to the Diana, because everything we do for the Diana is beneficial to all pollinators in Arkansas. So we try to create public awareness with these presentations. And in these presentations, we teach that it's necessary that we create and protect habitat, encourage year-round nectar with native plants, teach the importance of pesticide and herbicide use, and collect sightings data. This is a big one in my mind, that we just don't have. As I dig for more and more information, I find less and less. So collecting the sightings data, and we're doing that on iNaturalist, especially this coming year during Pollinator Week. And I'd love to have you join us on iNaturalist. We also have a presentation if anyone's interested. That's kind of an introduction to iNaturalist. If you aren't comfortable with it, I'm happy to help you get on board with that application and learn how to use it. So the promised comparison between the Monarch and the Diana. As you probably all know, butterflies are insects. They have the 3 body parts, 6 legs, a pair of antennae, and 0 to 2 pairs of wings. And when I ran across that 0 or 2 pairs of wings, I thought, well, that's weird. But if you think about it, a caterpillar doesn't have wings and it's still an insect. So I thought that was an interesting thing. I was this many years old when I learned that. So this is the male Diana on the left and the male Monarch on the right. So in comparison, these were both first identified in 1700s. They are both state butterflies. They are both considered threatened throughout their range. Obviously use the same 4-stage life cycle and require a host plant, whereas the Diana requires a larval host plant and the Monarch requires the adult egg-laying host plant. They also share this tidbit that they see with their eyes, smell with their antenna, and taste with their feet. Which I thought was kind of cool. So they are cousins. They both belong to the family Nymphalidae, which means brush-footed or 4-footed. So this image is a Asian common Mormon. I just picked it because it was the best image I could find that showed all 6 legs of this butterfly. So it is not an Nymphalidae. This image is of a male Diana, and you can see that it has 4 legs and a proboscis. So if you look closely at this magenta arrow, you'll see that's pointing at one of its front legs. So what they do is they hold their legs up. This is the whole family Nymphalidae. They hold those front legs up, and some of them actually have brush-like appendages that they can clean their proboscis with. But that's really the only purpose that I can find for those front legs. So a little more comparison between the Diana and the Monarch. That's the females on the bottom. They are considered large butterflies with a long flight season. And what that means is they need a lot of nectar. Both species exhibit sexual dimorphism, and I'll cover that term in a minute. And they also exhibit mimicry defenses. So that term sexual dimorphism, if you're not familiar with it, means the males and females have 2 different forms. Obviously, as with everything in the insect world, it's part of the reproductive repertoire. You'll see the Dianas are considered extreme dimorphism, different colors, different shapes or sizes. The females get about 4.5 inches wide, the males 4. And then for the Monarch, you'll see the males have this scent gland. It's almost just like a dot that's visible on the hind wing or the lower wing. And the female has a little bit thicker veins. So they're not nearly as extreme, but they are different. The ventral view is the underside, obviously seen when the wings are closed, and often used for camouflage and of predator avoidance. Oops, let me go back to that. You can see a little bit on these pictures, the best example of camouflage being the female Diana. Maybe not while she's on a yellow flower, but when she's walking around the 4th floor laying eggs, she's all but invisible. And you can see a little bit better side-by-side comparison of the Monarch. The dot on the left one is the male, and the thicker wings are really, thicker veins on the female are very obvious there. So the Argynnis part of the scientific name or the taxon means small black markings with silver spots, and those are on the underside of the hind wings, and you can see these arrows are pointing at the silver spots. They used to be Spiraea was the taxon, and that just meant silver spot. And they've since changed that to Argynnis, which means silver spots with the black around it. So, so the dorsal view or top side, seen when the wings are open, it's used for sexual signaling, sunning and puddling because they are cold-blooded. And if you're going to take pictures this pollinator month, set up some puddles, and really is the best way to get pictures of butterflies, in my opinion, because they just sit there, soaking up the sun like little solar panels. This dorsal view is also a good example of the different shape of the fritillary butterfly to the monarch. They're just a lot more rounded on the upper wings. So the female dorsal ID, some of the most common, I guess, lookalikes that one of the reasons that the Diana is not reported as often is because it looks like a lot of other butterflies. So we're trying to help with that identification education. One of the things that it looks like is the pipevine swallowtail, which you probably know is a poisonous butterfly due to the larva eating the pipevine. And this is probably one of the most common misidentified butterflies. So the Batesian mimicry that this slide references is in reference to the fact that the pipevine is actually poisonous and the Diana looks like it, but benefits from the bad taste of the other one, a lot like the monarchs taste bad. So some more identification. Probably the very most common one that we get is the question, is this a Diana? Is the red spotted purple? Because you can't always see the red spots, and it's really similar with that black pinstripe on the bottom. So of course the swallowtails, once their swallowtail is worn off, it's hard to tell that which ones are which, but the swallowtail, or the drip as I call it, is the best indication that it's not a Diana. And then the red spotted purple, the biggest difference to me is that the pinstripe that runs along the bottom is really dark and a lot thicker usually. But the big difference is the bottom wings are pointed, whereas the Diana is really rounded. So that's the most common mimics. And again, if you see these on a flower, you can almost always tell the Diana from the other lookalikes because she has no color on the bottom except for that the silver spots. So these are the two most common lookalikes for the Diana. And the biggest key here is that the Diana is always going to be that solid chocolate color in the middle. It won't ever be faded or variegated. And the same with the ventral ID, the male Diana has very little going on the hind or the lower wing except for those silver spots. So that's the biggest indicator there. So the larva, the caterpillar with the pipevine is very similar looking also. So even though the Diana fritillary, most research says that it only comes out to feed at night. I know this image looks like it's in the daytime, but Miss Sarah Bright actually had some captivated and took some amazing photos in her own lighting. So that's why it looks like it's full daylight. But for the most part, the Diana larva only eats at night. But if it is seen during the day, you can see the spikes on the caterpillar actually have spikes, and the pipevine are smooth. So that's just the two major differences. And then the Diana has sort of those triangular shaped horns. If you run across one, I'd like to know where it's at so I can come out and witness it. So the monarch life cycle we know that it goes to Mexico for vacation and comes back, but a lot of people don't realize it has multiple generations per year that live about 2 to 6 weeks. The females lay about 500 eggs every 30 days, from spring to summer. And they will lay eggs wherever there's a host plant. And after 20 years of trying to save the monarch, there's a lot of milkweed out there, and we can always do better with that. But they stand a good fighting chance at this point. So again, it's about a month from egg to adult, 500 times throughout the year. So from egg to caterpillar to chrysalis to adult every 30 days. And in comparison to that, the Diana life cycle only has 1 generation per year. They do have a very long flight season. So that's our 2 main vulnerabilities right there, is that they've got 1 shot per year per female to lay eggs. And they are the same generation for 5 years. So there's not any chance of new ones hatching and laying more eggs in that 5 months. That little caterpillar, once it hatches from the egg, will overwinter for the entire time as a 1 millimeter instar or first term caterpillar under the leaves. It will emerge in May. Usually the males emerge in May and the females a few weeks later. They will mate, then the males die off, and the females will lay eggs in the fall, and then, of course, she dies. So from caterpillar to chrysalis to adults, mating, laying eggs. This egg, the eggs are really pretty. I think I have a picture. Yeah, there we go. Kind of looks like a hot cross bun. So all of that's a tiny 1 millimeter instar or caterpillar that will lay in this frozen tundra of leaves if they're left alone all winter. So this life cycle of the Diana has specific challenges that the monarch doesn't necessarily show. So the 5 challenges that we see for the Diana are the limited range, lack of awareness on identification, and that they're in trouble. The fact that violets are considered a broadleaf weed by many people, the lack of year-long nectar, actually their preferred nectars, and then the habitat fragmentation. So I'll clarify those challenges a little bit. The Diana's range is declining. It's losing its habitat of moist mountain forest and woodlands that are near nectar-rich open areas. And that combination is critical because they have to have the moist mountain areas or tree-lined woodlands with food nearby. So the solution to that, as we see it, is to find and protect what's left. And that's part of our Diana count during Pollinator Week, is to find out where they actually are and to determine if we need to fight and get them on the endangered species list. So as comparison, you can see here the monarch sightings around the world. They may be declined in numbers, but they don't lack habitat near as much as the Diana. And again, we have monarch madness that's been going on for about 20 years. If you look on iNaturalist, there's over 270,000 observations for monarchs. And in comparison to that, this is the 2 ranges that the Diana occupies. They are the same species with 2 different main populations. The second population is in the Appalachians. And there is no Diana madness, just the Diana Project is the only one working on it. And up to date, we have less than 1,000 observations on iNaturalist. So again, that's our big goal during the Diana count is to increase those observations in Arkansas, so that we can know where they are and where they are not. So the second challenge is creating awareness that Arkansas does have a state butterfly, and that it is threatened. So we would like to ask everybody to share your awareness. You can go on our website and find our social media there. If you have any other ideas about how we can share this information, you're welcome to email me. My email is also on the website. So back to the comparison, the Diana and the Monarch. In the spring, the caterpillar is coming out and eating the violets. It can only eat violets. If there are no violets and she's laid eggs, they will just hatch and starve to death. So there is some research that says if there's not violets near the wooded edge, she won't even bother to lay eggs. But either way, there's no caterpillar or no butterflies if she can't lay eggs, or if she lays them and they starve. So the violets are critical to the caterpillar. Also in the spring, the monarch's coming back from its vacation in Mexico, and it is now breeding and feeding and hatching all the way back to its range. So every 30 days is a new generation. So the spring host plant, one of the reasons that the Diana needs more awareness, again, the violet is considered a broadleaf weed and often gets sprayed or just pulled. It's free. Most people have this common blue violet in Arkansas. If you don't have it, your neighbors probably do. So instead of them spraying it, just go pull theirs. But one of the big comparisons or challenges is that because violets are so prominent by themselves, there's not really a lot of money in that market like there is with milkweed. And also it's a lot cheaper to leave the violets than it is to spray them. But you'll notice come spring, there'll be just a multitude of advertisements about spraying your broadleaf weeds so you can have that golf course-like yard. So that spring host plant, it isn't a broadleaf weed, and we need to spread that knowledge. We have actually 15 different kinds of violets in Arkansas that are native. Curtis made up a song that roses are red and violets are blue, cream, yellow, and multicolored. So we do have a lot of choices, and I have the list of the violets on the website also. So according to the National Wildlife Service, there's 23 species of wildlife use violets, and many of those are the other greater fritillaries. They use them either as food or the host plant. So the solution to challenge number 3 is to recognize and learn to love the violets. So one thing, when we started doing this presentation, everyone we talked to wanted to know where they could get violets to plant. And violets are not necessarily the problem. It's the nectar plants and the nearness, the fragmentation of the habitat. So if you have Dianas in your area, this is sort of a caveat. Planting violets might be beneficial, but it won't make them magically appear in your yard. Just wanted to put that out there. And here is a quick list of the violets in Arkansas. There is the third one down, the Viola canadensis and the Viola petitifida are both species of concern in Arkansas. And Miss Jennifer Ogle just asked that I let people know not to buy those seeds. I'm sorry, also the Walters violet, the last one, don't buy those seeds and introduce them to Arkansas. If you're going to plant those, only plant them from a local source. And then the most common one, obviously, is the blue. So during the summer, Both species are breeding and mating. Again, the monarch, anywhere there's a milkweed, they will be laying eggs. So that's a cream violet there at the bottom left. It's one of the more unique ones. So by late summer, the males are dying off and the female Dianas go into what's called estivation, which is sort of a dormancy during the hot period. Also in late summer, the monarchs are starting to hatch the super generation, which all over the world are being tagged and studied and celebrated while the Diana continues to go unnoticed. So the super generation also goes into reproductive diapause where they don't mate or lay eggs on their way south. So challenge number 4 for the Diana is a lack of year-long nectar. So they begin to hatch, the larva, hatches in April to feed, and then will emerge in May. And then the females, the adult females, can live as long as into November. So much like the monarch way stations, we need to plant nectar for each season for the Dianas. And even the monarch way stations don't necessarily have year-long nectar. The milkweed isn't from April to November typically. So I do have this list also on the website, and this has some of the more common and easily found violets for, I'll say, north of I-40 probably is a good location. And then the bottom half of this chart is some of the favored nectar plants for the Diana. And again, this is on the website, but you can see that the majority of them are tall, 3 foot or taller, and they're also pink to purple for the most part. This is not a pretty slide, but I just found this, so I haven't had time to add it to the list, but I found it very interesting. This was from one of the recent studies, and it was just interesting to me that the percent of females that were found feeding or observed on different plants is that much different than the males. And of course, this is not a controlled study, so there just might have been more males at that one particular spot, but I thought that was interesting. But these are also the top preferred plants that this researcher observed the Dianas on. And I'll be adding that information to that list on the website. So the Diana patch is one thing that we are encouraging people to plant. And I know that not all of the plants in that picture are native. I snagged that off the internet because it was a very pretty small garden. And that was the point we're trying to get across, that it doesn't have to be huge. It just needs to be an area set aside that's pesticide and herbicide free, and has year-round native nectar, and has some leaves and twigs and a little bit of water. That's the perfect pollinator habitat. Yeah, and that's my disclaimer. I did borrow that from the internet, and it's not all native plants, but it is pretty. So into the fall, we need late blooming plants. So one of the things that we need to create awareness around is that goldenrod isn't what causes allergies. It's a great fall high quality nectar plant. And we have 22 species of asters in Arkansas. And you can find a list of all of the native plants. If you're not familiar with it, the Atlas of Vascular Plants of Arkansas is an amazing resource. And you can find all of these plants there. And it actually shows which county they occur in. But asters are great fall plants for many, many pollinators, especially our solitary bumblebees that are fattening up to overwinter. So challenge number 5, the fragmented habitat. At last count, this is from 2008. This was the last time that they were counted or observed and documented as a research project. So in 2008, they were already gone from the majority of northern Arkansas that they used to live in. So one of the things that we're really pushing this year with that pollinator or the Diana count is to locate more. This was one person's attempt to catalog as many as he could find in a season. And I think there's just more information that we can do as citizen scientists through iNaturalist. And let me back that up. So in Benton County and Washington County, we have spotted 3 or 4 this year just with the Diana count since we started our Facebook page. People have documented in Elm Springs and 2 in Fayetteville in town. So they're still around. We just need to find where they are. So one of the things that I do at presentations to people who aren't master naturalists, and this might be beneficial to some of you that just need a reminder. So I tell this tale of 2 cities. Everything you need is in either New York City or LA. You have food, water, other people, and shelter, and you're just happy. What if there were no gas stations between New York City and LA? You couldn't get to the other city. So each one of those cities, the gene pool eventually would get a little icky. And when the gene pool gets thinned out, it becomes vulnerable. If you have a catastrophe in either or both of those cities, you'd have to get to the other city because your life depends on it. And if you try, you'll run out of gas and starve to death somewhere in Oklahoma. And nobody wants that. So that's one of the ways that I show folks who aren't in tune with conservation so much about the challenge of fragmented habitat. I know I heard someone who checked in said that they were a black bear fan, and I know the bears really, being a large mammal, have as much trouble as anything getting from one place to another. So back to that research paper, you could see there's just miles and miles between where this researcher found Diana habitat. And so those small populations, their genetics are getting icky, and it won't take much to destroy any or all of those should some sort of pest or bacteria invade those populations. So on to challenge number 5, which is the winter habitat. So the Diana female has laid 1,200 eggs sometime in October. And that egg will incubate for 5 weeks, and then it will hatch, eat its eggshell, and then bury down into the leaves all winter. And it's literally like less than, what is that, 1 millimeter, less than 1/4 of an inch, or about 1/4 of an inch long. So the solution to that is leave the leaves. And I know the Xerces Society preaches the leave the leaves, and we see a lot of memes on Facebook and social media about leaving the leaves, but it really is critical. And I always tell people, if anybody wants to start a new business of rescuing leaves and relocating them, I'm in for a brainstorming session on that idea. So just let me know. I think it would be a great business. So a summary of those comparison parts: they do belong to the same family, Nymphalidae. They both exhibit mimicry defenses. They're both considered highly collectible, although the monarch, being endangered, is not allowed to be collectible legally, but the Diana has no protection against that currently. They are sexually dimorphic. Large butterflies have the same life cycle and are both state symbols. So that's the summary of the comparison. So again, a reminder, Arkansas Game and Fish Commission says our best actions are to create and protect habitat, use native plant in our gardens, be responsible with chemical use, and continue to outreach and educate for pollinators. And that is the gist of it. Anybody has any questions? I'm not sure how long I took, maybe hoping the timing was good, but I'm ready for questions.
You have time for questions.
Okay. I don't know if you have everybody unmuted or,
Okay, I have a question.
yes.
So I was a little confused about the violets are not the problem because there's generally plenty of violets around, but the proximity of nectaring plants and so on and so forth. So is it the instars that eat or that need the nectar, or is it the adults? What do the instars eat if it's not the nectar?
The instars, the first instar, well, the instars need the violet. So it's a larval host plant. The adults lay eggs near the violets, or the females do.
Okay.
And it's thought that the males actually, when they emerge first, scout for the violets in order to pick breeding grounds, but that's not proven. But it is a fact that the larval has to have the violets. The nectar plants being the taller, high quality nectar, and not just milkweed that they need in more places, again, for the habitat fragmentation.
Thank
So
you.
Hey, Sean,
yes.
this is David. So looking at habitat fragmentation, it looks like most of the sightings are either in the Ouachita Mountains or maybe in the Boston Mountains, kind of on either side of the Arkansas Valley. It's kind of what it looked like to me.
Mhm.
And this being a forested species, would we see this species in urban environments like Little Rock, or is it really, you've got to get into a little more? I mean, of course, we're in the foothills of the Ouachitas here, so
Mhm.
that's fine, but do we need to get a little further west, I guess is what I'm saying, because it seems like that's
Oh.
where the sightings mostly are.
Yes. So that's one of the things, and I'm going to try to pull up my iNaturalist while I'm here to help. One of the things we don't know is, as their habitat gets smaller and smaller, are they going to adapt? So one of the things we did have two sightings this year in Fayetteville, about a mile from the library. So that's right in town near. Of course, we have a lot of woods in Fayetteville. So I was just going to blow this up a little bit. So you can see some of the sightings here recent. Let's see how recent this was in and near the outskirts of Little Rock. So maybe not downtown, maybe. That's one of the things with the Diana count, is we need to pinpoint where they are. If they're coming through downtown Little Rock looking for food, then and the habitat, then that's something we need to provide. But currently, because people haven't been documenting them, whether it's because lack of identification, understanding, or just lack of looking because they don't know that they're in trouble. That's kind of what we're trying to combat with the Diana count. But you can see that they are in different places than are expected. They used to just think they were only in Mount Magazine, but historically they used to be in almost every county of Arkansas except for Crowley's Ridge, on top of Crowley's Ridge. And I've actually found a state park interpreter in Crowley's Ridge that swears they're there. So he'll be looking for them this year too. So maybe every county in Arkansas used to have them, but we can't prove it anymore.
Okay.
Did that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
So you said passing through, but they don't migrate like monarchs, right? They kind of live their whole life right in the same area.
Well, that's one of the things that isn't clear in the research, and I think that partly it's because nobody's studied that. They haven't been tagged and tracked like the monarchs. And so I can't answer to that because I don't have that information.
Okay.
I'm looking here. You can see on the iNaturalist, these sightings are from 2019, 2021. I think this is Rattles Garden in Valonia. So the ones that are closer to Little Rock are a little older. But it's possible that you have them in town. So again, the big thing for Pollinator Week, June 17th through the 23rd, is to get as many people educated in what they're looking for and where to look. Their habitat is not necessarily a certain elevation. It does need to be near trees and violets, but again, we have parkland, we have we have woods and we have violets. It's a really prolific flower. We could always use more because, like I said, all of the greater fritillaries, not all of them, most of the greater fritillaries also use the violets as a host plant of some sort, whether it be larva or egg laying. So it is a necessary plant. You can't have too many violets, I don't think. But it is the ability to get from point A to point B and have food and habitat in between that is critical for the pollinators.
So a little shameless plug here for BioBlast. Sean, you are going to be doing a more in-depth presentation on the Diana project at BioBlast, which happens to be at the very end of May and beginning of June, so just right before Pollinator Week. Is that correct? You're going to be doing a either an hour and a half or 3 hour long presentation there?
That's correct. I think it'll be more of the same of this, and it will also have the introduction to iNaturalist as a second part of that presentation, and then hopefully we'll have time and be slotted to go out and do a walk, because the Dianas, as near as I can tell, should be at that location, and they will both be female and males should be out by then. So we may do some Diana sighting.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to having you at BioBlast.
Thank you. I'm excited for that. Any more
So,
questions?
question,
Yes.
um,
Let's see.
BioBlast is Fayetteville activities.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
BioBlast is a Fayetteville activity.
The statewide activity.
Statewide, and I don't remember the name of the Rockefeller Institute, is that right?
Yeah, I'll be at the
On Petit Jean Mountain.
Rockefeller Institute, just outside of the Petit Jean State Park.
That's right.
Okay.
May
Okay.
30, May 31st, June 1st, and June 2nd.
Got it. And I did document a couple of Diana's this past summer for we were doing a botanical survey up at Nimrod and Blue Mountain, and we found one at each lake. One was feeding on Missouri ironweed and the other was feeding on a tall thistle. There
Thistle.
should be an iNaturalist somewhere.
Very good. Thank you very much. That's good. That's good news. The only ones that I've seen in the wild were on the Cirsium carolinum, the soft thistle.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I think the thistle is a favorite of theirs for sure in all of the research that I found. And I was just tickled to find that there was a thistle that isn't offensive. So look up that Cirsium carolinum. It's a really nice plant. But
Okay.
yes, great. Thanks for doing that. Hopefully we'll see you out at the Diana count too.
I'll make an effort to be there.
Great, thank you. And if you're on iNaturalist, we do have a project called the Diana Project. If you want to join us, that way any Dianas that you find will automatically be flagged for our data.
Okay, I'll do that right now.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I see there's a question in the chat. I was just gonna go back and see if I missed anything. Violets do make a great ground cover of Curtis, my co-founder, actually has a thermometer, and if you go out and do the thermometer under the violets as a green mulch, it's many degrees cooler than mulch or wood chips. And I think it it's holds some moisture in, obviously a lot better, but it's so prolific that it could just grow around and under anything. Most of them will do full sun to full shade, and they could care less as long as you just let them go. Yeah, see, Emily has a lot of violets if anybody needs any. So having a lawn full of violets is not a bad thing. That's correct, but it won't necessarily attract them if you're not near a woodland edge. But again, we don't know for sure where they are. And it may be that they need some help and need some nectar and violets somewhere in town. Maybe they're going to learn to not have to have that very specific habitat. Nurseries don't sell them. There are some nurseries on the Ozark Wild Ones has a website, and I have that link. I can send someone if you want to message me. Of local nurseries that are sort of native plant and local friendly, and I've found some of the birdfoot and cream violet. So yeah, I answered the nectar question. Mandy wants violets if anybody has them. And again, I don't know how far that Diana travels. I don't have that information. I don't know that anyone actually has it documented. Thank you, Leah. And Mandy, does the Diana Project have a child classroom friendly presentation? We have a trifold that has big, pretty pictures and minimal convoluted information that could work for kids. And I'm happy to share that artwork with someone. And we really struggle if anybody wants to volunteer to help. It depends on the age group you're talking about, Mandy. We are in the works of a large read aloud book for younger kids. And then we also have a coloring page, a kind of a fold out book that has the life cycle on it for specifically for the Diana Fritillary. But that's all we have right now. And if anybody has ideas for that, I'd love to have those suggestions. I think that's it. That's all the questions I see. Anybody else?
No, and this is Darcia again, and we really appreciate you taking the time to share with us tonight. I've learned a lot. I think we all have, and really good, interesting work. I see, evidence that you are a certified interpretive guide in terms of your knowing your audience and knowing what's important to us. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Can you answer one question about that?
About the certification?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I'm not. I have taken the mini certification course. I
Okay.
haven't paid the exorbitant amount of money to have the full certification yet. So,
Okay.
I have taken several of our mini classes we've done here with the Northwest Arkansas Master Naturalist. So, had some training. I just haven't paid the big bucks to get the certification yet.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, and I'll get in touch with you about a couple other things to wrap up. But we really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. It's a really interesting project, and
Great.
we always enjoy hearing from people. And the questions tell me it was a really interesting evening. So thank you again, Sean.
Thank you. I appreciate you letting me be here. And again, I'd invite everybody to check us out. We have a Facebook, we have an Instagram. I'm not real active on there, but the Facebook page is really good for identification, education. So if nothing else, just join us on there.
Good night.
Okay, good night. Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you so much.
Yay,
Yay.
thank you.
Good stuff.
Yeah, great.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks. Who's Diane?
It just ended.
Yeah.